Your neighbor just bought a new car. You were perfectly happy with yours until this morning. Now every time you walk to the driveway, you notice the scuff on the bumper, the faded paint near the hood, the way the interior smells faintly of something you cannot quite name. The car did not change. Your neighbor got a car. That is all that happened. But something shifted inside you, and now a purchase you were satisfied with 2 days ago feels inadequate. This is not vanity. This is not weakness. This is one of the oldest and most deeply wired cognitive mechanisms in the human brain, and it is pointed directly at your wallet every single day. It does not announce itself. It does not send a warning. It simply adjusts your baseline, the invisible standard against which you measure whether what you have is enough. And once that baseline moves, the only way to feel okay again is to move your spending to match it. You probably know this feeling. You went to a friend's house and noticed the kitchen renovation. You saw a coworker's vacation photos. You scrolled past someone's new furniture, new watch, new neighborhood, and for a moment, just a moment, something in you shifted. You did not want any of those things an hour ago. Now you are aware that you do not have them. This is called social comparison. And according to decades of research in behavioral economics and psychology, it is one of the single most reliable drivers of financial behavior in modern life. Not income, not investment returns, not budgeting discipline, what other people appear to have, and what that makes you feel about what you have, is shaping your financial decisions in ways most people never examine and almost nobody accounts for. And the cost is not small. The cost is compounding. It follows you across every decade of your working life and quietly redirects money that could have been building your future into purchases designed to manage a feeling. My name is Arthur. This channel is about understanding how money actually works, not how we wish it worked, but how it behaves when it meets a human brain. Subscribe if that sounds like something you need. New video every week. Here is exactly what social comparison is, where it comes from, how it costs you money in specific measurable ways, and what you can actually do about it. Social comparison theory was first formalized by the psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954. Festinger observed that humans have a fundamental drive to evaluate their own opinions, abilities, and circumstances, and that when objective standards are unavailable, they do this by comparing themselves to other people. The comparison is not optional. It is not a personality flaw. It is a feature of the human cognitive system, built in over hundreds of thousands of years when knowing your standing relative to others in your group was directly relevant to your survival. The problem is that the mechanism was never designed for a world in which your comparison group is no longer the 40 people in your immediate community. It was not designed for television, which has been showing average households aspirational lifestyles since the 1950s. It was not designed for social media, which delivers an algorithmically curated stream of the best moments, biggest purchases, and most impressive milestones of hundreds or thousands of people simultaneously, all day, every day, into the palm of your hand. Your brain is running a Stone Age comparison engine in a world that has engineered the inputs to make that engine run constantly at maximum intensity. And the financial consequences of that mismatch are severe. Let us talk about the two types of social comparison and why one of them is significantly more dangerous to your finances than the other. Festinger identified two directions of social comparison. Upward comparison is when you compare yourself to someone who appears to be doing better than you. The neighbor with the new car, the colleague with the corner office, the Instagram account with the vacation photos. Downward comparison is when you compare yourself to someone who appears to be doing worse, and it typically produces a brief sense of relief or gratitude. Upward comparison is the one that costs you money, and modern life, particularly social media and advertising, is almost entirely engineered to produce upward comparison at scale. Here is why this matters financially. When you make an upward comparison, your brain registers a gap between where you are and where the comparison target appears to be. That gap produces a feeling, something between dissatisfaction, inadequacy, and mild anxiety. And spending money is one of the fastest ways to close that gap, or more precisely, to feel as though you are closing it. According to research published in the Journal of Consumer Research, exposure to upward social comparisons reliably increases spending on visible, status-signaling goods, things other people can see: clothing, cars, homes, vacations, restaurants, anything that communicates social standing, not food, not utilities, not retirement contributions, visible goods. The spending triggered by upward comparison is not random. It is targeted directly at the thing that created the feeling in the first place, being seen to have less. And because the comparison is often with an idealized version of someone else's life rather than their actual financial reality, the spending it produces is frequently irrational relative to what the person who triggered it is actually doing. Your neighbor who bought the new car may be carrying a $700 monthly payment on a vehicle they cannot afford. The colleague with the corner office may have taken a pay cut for the title. The Instagram vacation was posted by someone who went into credit card debt to take it and has been quietly paying it off for 8 months. You are not comparing yourself to their reality. You are comparing yourself to their presentation, and your spending response is real. Let us put specific numbers on this. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, American households spend an average of approximately $1,800 per year on apparel and clothing. Research on social comparison and conspicuous consumption suggests that a meaningful portion of discretionary apparel spending, estimates in behavioral economics literature range from 20 to 40%, is driven primarily by social comparison rather than functional need. Take the lower estimate, 20%. That is $360 per year spent on clothing specifically to manage a social comparison feeling, not because the clothes were needed. At a 7% annual return over 30 years, $360 per year becomes approximately $34,000. That is the low estimate on clothing alone. Now apply that same logic to the full range of categories where social comparison drives spending: housing upgrades, vehicle choices, dining, electronics, travel. The cumulative annual cost of comparison-driven spending for a typical household is not $360. Research published in Psychological Science and the Journal of Economic Psychology suggests that social comparison effects can account for 15 to 25% of total discretionary spending in households that are actively engaged with social media. For a household spending $30,000 per year on discretionary items, 15% is $4,500 annually. Over 30 years at 7%, that is $422,000. Not lost in a single bad investment, lost in the slow, invisible accumulation of purchases that existed primarily to close a gap that was never real in the first place. Now let us talk about the mechanism that makes this particularly hard to interrupt: the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill, also called hedonic adaptation, is the well-documented human tendency to return to a relatively stable baseline level of satisfaction, regardless of what happens to your circumstances. You buy the new car. It feels good for a few weeks. Then it becomes your car. The baseline resets, and now you need the next thing to feel the way the new car made you feel. When the hedonic treadmill interacts with social comparison, you get a particularly vicious loop. The upward comparison creates dissatisfaction. You spend to close the gap. The new purchase feels good briefly. Adaptation returns you to baseline, but now your social comparison reference group has also moved, because spending tends to move people into higher spending social environments, which creates new upward comparisons, which create new dissatisfaction. The treadmill speeds up. The spending required to keep pace with the new baseline increases, and because the spending is partly financed by debt, the cost compounds. This is the financial mechanism behind lifestyle inflation, the phenomenon where income increases are absorbed entirely by spending increases with no improvement in actual financial position. According to a 2019 study by Northwestern Mutual, 56% of Americans say they live paycheck to paycheck. The median household income in the United States is approximately $75,000. The reason most people at that income level have not accumulated significant wealth is not that the income is insufficient. It is that the spending baseline has been continuously recalibrated upward by social comparison, and every income increase has been consumed by the comparison-driven adjustment to the new baseline. Here is a specific example of what that costs. Imagine two people, both earning $75,000 per year from age 25 to 65. Person A gets a raise of $5,000 at age 35. They invest the entire raise, $417 per month, from age 35 to 65. At a 7% return, that invested raise alone grows to approximately $502,000 by age 65. Person B gets the same raise, but they use it to upgrade their apartment, their car payment, and their monthly dining budget. Because their social circle has shifted slightly and the comparison baseline has moved, they invest nothing from the raise. At age 65, the $502,000 gap between them and person A is not explained by income. It is explained entirely by what the raise did to their social comparison calibration. $500,000. One raise, one comparison-driven decision, compounded over 30 years. Now let us talk about social media specifically, because it has fundamentally changed the scale of this problem in a way that previous generations did not face. Before social media, your comparison group was bounded by your physical social environment. You compared yourself to your neighbors, your coworkers, your family. This was already a significant driver of spending. The phrase, keeping up with the Joneses, dates to a 1913 comic strip, but the group was finite and the exposure was limited. Social media removed that boundary entirely. The average American spends approximately 2 hours and 27 minutes per day on social media. In that time, they are exposed to a continuous, algorithmically optimized stream of upward comparison content. Because platforms are specifically designed to surface content that generates engagement, and content that creates the gap feeling generates more engagement than content that does not. The result is that the modern comparison group is no longer 40 neighbors. It is effectively everyone you follow, plus everyone their posts expose you to, plus the sponsored content placed deliberately to exploit the comparison feeling for commercial purposes. Your comparison baseline is being set by a group that is both enormous and curated to be more impressive than average. Research from the University of Pennsylvania found that limiting social media use to 30 minutes per day produced significant reductions in feelings of social comparison, loneliness, and depression. The financial implications of that finding are significant. Reducing social media exposure reduces the frequency and intensity of upward comparison, which reduces comparison-driven spending. This is not a coincidence. It is the mechanism. So what do you do about it? Because you cannot simply decide to stop making comparisons. The brain does it automatically, but you can change the inputs, change the reference group, and change the financial habits that comparison-driven feelings tend to produce. The first intervention is to audit your comparison inputs. Your comparison group is not fixed. It is determined by what you expose yourself to. For the next 30 days, audit every source of upward comparison content in your daily environment: social media accounts, magazines, YouTube channels, podcasts, conversations. Ask a single question about each. Does this source regularly make me feel like what I have is insufficient? If the answer is yes, the source is costing you money, not metaphorically, literally, because every time it triggers the gap feeling, it increases the probability of comparison-driven spending. Unfollow aggressively. Mute without guilt. You are not being antisocial. You are protecting your financial baseline from being reset by people whose actual financial situation you do not know and who are presenting a curated version of their life for reasons that have nothing to do with your well-being. The second intervention is to compare backward, not upward. Your brain defaults to upward comparison, but comparison is not inherently upward. It is directional, and you can deliberately redirect it. Instead of comparing your current financial situation to someone who appears to have more, compare your current financial situation to your own situation 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Are you further along? Are you carrying less debt? Do you have more invested? Is your emergency fund larger? This is called temporal self-comparison, and research in behavioral economics shows it produces significantly better financial motivation than social comparison, because it is based on real data about your actual trajectory rather than a distorted perception of someone else's position. Write down 3 financial metrics: net worth, debt balance, monthly savings rate, and check them against where you were 12 months ago. Do this quarterly. The comparison will show you real progress, which is the most reliable antidote to the gap feeling that upward social comparison creates. The third intervention is to identify your comparison triggers and create a spending delay. Most comparison-driven spending does not happen immediately after the comparison. It happens within a window of hours to days after the comparison creates the gap feeling. You see the vacation photos. You feel the gap. 2 days later, you are booking a trip you had not planned and cannot fully afford. The intervention is a simple rule. For any unplanned discretionary purchase over $100, you wait 72 hours before completing it. During those 72 hours, the emotional intensity of the comparison-driven feeling will drop significantly. Research on the psychology of impulse purchasing shows that the gap feeling has a half-life of roughly 24 to 48 hours. After 72 hours, if you still want the thing for reasons unrelated to the comparison feeling, buy it. If the urgency has faded, that is your evidence that the purchase was comparison-driven. A 72-hour rule applied consistently will not eliminate comparison-driven spending, but it will catch a significant portion of it, particularly the purchases that feel urgent and status-related in the moment but lose their urgency quickly. The fourth intervention is to make your actual reference group visible. The reason social comparison is so financially destructive is that the comparison targets are visible, and your own financial reality is often invisible, even to yourself. The person with the new car is visible. Your own net worth trajectory is not visible unless you look at it. Make it visible. Put your net worth number somewhere you see it regularly. Track your invested assets monthly. Know your debt balance to the dollar. When your brain tries to close the gap between you and the person with the new car, give it a counter image. The gap between where your net worth is today and where it will be in 10 years if you do not redirect money toward comparison spending. The comparison the brain makes is always between a vivid present image and an abstract future outcome. Your job is to make the future outcome vivid. A graph of your projected net worth at retirement, updated monthly, is one of the most powerful financial tools available, not because it changes the math, but because it changes what you are comparing against. Here is the core of what this video covered. Social comparison is not a personality flaw. It is a feature of the human brain designed for a world that no longer exists. In the world that does exist, one that has spent decades engineering the scale, frequency, and intensity of upward comparison to drive consumer spending, that feature has become a significant financial liability. The gap feeling is real, the dissatisfaction is real, but the premise it rests on, that what the comparison target has represents your own inadequacy, is almost always false. You do not know their financial reality. You are comparing your inside to their outside, and the spending that gap feeling produces is compounding in the wrong direction. 4 things you can actually do. Audit your comparison inputs and remove the ones that cost you money. Compare backward against your own progress instead of upward against other people's presentations. Apply a 72-hour delay to unplanned purchases over $100. Make your own financial trajectory visible so the brain has a real counter image for the gap feeling. The neighbor's car is still in the driveway. Your car still works. The only thing that changed was what your brain decided to compare it to. And that, unlike your neighbor's purchasing decisions, is something you can actually control.